Today, the ds-incubator starts a new series, and it is about working with Docker, mostly for reproducible research and basically to develop software and to use software, analyze data with software. But not so much, the focus is not going to be on how you can build Docker images yourself. That is a whole thing on itself. It is going to be the focus on using images that some other people have built already. And basically the big wins. So how we can use that tool to enhance what we do every day. So my idea was mostly to cover some of the very useful images that a project called Rocker provides, which is a word smash between Docker and R. So Docker images for R. And also understand that I'm relatively new to Docker. I read a couple of books and I've been trying it for a few times, but I'm not as experienced with Docker as I am with other tools. So luckily we have Alex here in the series, who is going to be my support. He's going to be, prompting discussions. He's going to be correcting me when I say something wrong or extending my teachings when they are insufficient, and might also be leading some meetups. So that is the very vague, rough, general introduction. Today I wanted to introduce you to the Rocker project in particular, so I'm going to do just that, and also to do a little brief explanation of how the series work. So let's start there. So every series has a repository on the 2 Degrees Investing organization. If you are new to this series, then this comment might be relevant to you. So they all start with DS for ds-incubator, which stands for data science. But then they have a dot and the topic name. So we are now covering Docker. So it's ds.docker, the repository that you want to look for. And there you will have the most useful information. There is basically the README file that gives you a little bit of an explanation what the series is going to be about, and a syllabus. This time I added a bunch of things that I think you should be able to do after we finish this series. So I'm going to be checking boxes as we move on and we cover the things that I think you can do with this series. For example, you should be able to use a Unix terminal even if you're in Windows, and Windows is not a Unix system, and still you could access a Unix terminal with Docker. You could also use Docker for a bunch of other things, including, for example, using RStudio from the web browser, even if you don't have RStudio installed in your computer or even R installed in your computer. So there's a bunch of things that really relate to what we do day to day, and Docker can make that work easier and more reproducible. So today I'm going to be talking about how to get started with the Rocker project. So let's go to the website of the Rocker project and see what it is that we can do with it. The focus of today is going to be to run just R in a Docker container. So this should work only if you have installed Docker already. And I should clarify that this meetup is not going to be teaching you about how to install it. Because it is sometimes you can waste a lot of time just trying to figure out things that are very specific to one person's computer and the reasons why that computer might or might not be able to install something. So I'm sorry to kind of leave you alone there, but if you do need some support for installing Docker, then the space could be most likely or most appropriately would be a help desk. So I'm very happy to me and maybe others in this room to help each other install Docker. And if you haven't done it yet, I encourage you to do it. So you try the things that I'm showing here. But if you haven't, it's not a problem. I'm not expecting you to kind of follow my live demo. So by the way, I think as always, I forgot to share my screen, right?
Yes. That's fine.
Thank you. So it's recorded in the video. So yeah, what I was showing is not much. So I'm showing now. You see my screen, right?
Yes, thanks.
Great. So yeah, I was showing the repository that is is hosting now the syllabus, and if we write some code, it's gonna live there. That's where you can find it. Scrolling down in that repo, you will find the README with an explanation of what the series is about, and the syllabus, which is a draft, is very flexible, and we're going to adapt it as we go based on the interest that I see you have in specific topics. So here's what I was explaining that you should be able to do, including, for example, using RStudio from the web browser. And getting started is the topic of today. So we're going to be focusing on the Rocker project, which is this page here, rockerproject.org. And the very first page has the two lines that I want to show today. So for this, you have to have Docker installed, and here is a link to install it. So if you click there, you will have the instructions that you need to get Docker for your system, if it's a Mac, if it's a Windows, or if it's a Linux system. So that is something that you do on your own, and if you need help, please do use the help desks. These two lines are the ones I want to cover. Let's start for the first one. So the first line, if you have already Docker installed, what we'll do, we'll start R, but in Docker. So let's do just that. I'm gonna jump to a terminal. So in your computer, find a way to launch a terminal. RStudio actually provides a terminal as well, but I'm using just the vanilla terminal that comes with the system that I have, which is an Ubuntu system. So I'm gonna just paste that line there that comes from the Rocker project and run it. That's I'm not gonna explain it just now. I'm gonna explain it a bit later. So that line, as you can see, started R in my computer. You can see that it is, for example, 4.1.1. That's the version of R that it is running. And here I can do whatever I can do with R, like sum, 1 and 2 and get 3. So this is R. It is very exciting, but it doesn't seem very exciting because it is the experience that you have all the time. So how is this different from your experience with R? Well, this is not running in your computer, so this should work even if you do not have R in your computer. So you are new to 2 degrees, you need to run R, you didn't even have time to install R. Okay, you can do this. You can install just Docker and then use this mini computer that is triggered by these commands here that I'm going to show in a moment. But before I explain those, let me show you something that is even closer to our experience, which is the idea of using R, but not from a terminal, but instead from RStudio. So how Docker can, or how can I use Docker to run RStudio? Well, here is all that you need to do, and I'm going to explain this in a moment. For now, I'm going to just copy those lines and paste them in the terminal. So if you have Docker installed, this should work for you. If it doesn't, again, we can talk about that in the help desk or maybe in discussions at the end. So I'm going to run those lines, and let's see, I already have an error here. Error response when demo drive fair programming external connectivity endpoint blah 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 blah. Fail port is already okay. Okay, it looks like I'm already using basically when I run this command, a specific address in my web browser is going to be available for me to use RStudio. So it looks like I already ran that command already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point my browser to that address, which is this one here, localhost 8787. And where does that information come from? Well, it is explained here in the Rocker project. So with a little bit of patience, you should be able to figure it out. But my role here is going to be exactly to kind of break down all the things that the Rocker project is saying in this documentation, and you're going to understand them. For now, it's not my goal to explain them, but you will understand them soon. So I pointed the browser to that address that I saw there, localhost 8787. It was auto-completed or expanded to this longer URL. And here is where I'm going to log into RStudio. But before I do that, I hear that there is a hand raised. So let's see if there is something burning that you want to ask. Alex, go ahead.
Nothing that can't hold on for later.
Okay, so then let me at least start the session so that people get super excited about staring at RStudio, which they do all the time. I'm being a little sarcastic here. So let's do, okay, so how do I log in? Here in the Rocker project, there is instructions. It is telling me that I should use the user and password. The user is going to be RStudio, and the password is going to be your password. The password was set in this command here, as you might suspect if you're looking at the command like strongly enough. So let's try that. Let's try, here I open RStudio, different to your daily experience. Here I'm logging in to RStudio as opposed to just RStudio opening it. There is a way to kind of avoid this, but let's do not talk about that just now. And then your password is what I'm supposed to add there. So I'm going to paste that and sign in. And there it is. So that is RStudio. Again, it might not look very exciting because you are used to this experience in your computer, but the difference here is that this is not your computer. The idea is that you can use RStudio completely from the web browser. So you are new to 2 degrees, you only have installed, say, Chrome in your computer and nothing else. Well, the next thing you could do is install Docker, and then you can get this, run that command that I show you on the terminal and get access to RStudio without even installing R or RStudio in your computer. So here is, that is kind of the magic, right? So that was only a motivating example without explaining what those commands are, just to show you how relatively quickly you can get a whole data science computing environment ready to go without the usual pain that entails installing all those tools yourself. So instead of running this on Docker, I was running this on my computer. I have to install R, I have to install RStudio myself, and that takes generally minutes or hours sometimes. So well, with that, I hope I have demonstrated the how basically what the kind of thing that we're going to be talking about here and the kinds of thing that we're going to be learning about. Basically, we're going to be trying to break down these commands to learn what they are so that you can combine them differently to create new things and to use Docker in new ways. So with that, I'm going to pause here. And Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my big thought is it's very easy for people to not really understand why or when to use Docker versus like, well, I've already got R and RStudio installed on my computer. They were the first things that I put on there, right? So what is the purpose of bundling up something into a Docker image rather than just doing it the way I've always done it, right? And ultimately, I think Mauro hit the nail on the head with this, think of this as a new computer, right? Except it is a computer that you can send to someone, right? So imagine I set up my analysis and I've got my Docker image all set up to run some analysis, let's call it PACTA, right? Cool. So then instead of sending instructions on how to set up your computer to run PACTA and trusting you to make sure that you set that up correctly and then supporting you if like you miscopy a instruction or only copy the first line of like something that should be 3 lines. We've all done that. I do that way too often. Instead, imagine Mauro just like taking that computer that he has set up, putting it into a FedEx envelope and sending it to you. Except he can send it to all of you, and you all get that computer that is specially set up to run PACTA, and you know that it works, right? So it becomes very valuable when you want to start sharing your analysis with other people. Which leads to the when do we use Docker? Like where in the workflow should we start worrying about, does this need to be Dockerized? Does it not, right? Yeah, for real, like treating this as the ultimate form of a reproducible example, because it's not just I am sending you the data for the reproducible example, it's I am sending you the data, and like a good reprex will have both a data file that works and all of the system info. The Docker image contains not just the system info in R, but like also all of the different things that live outside of R that get called by R behind the scenes. So when to use Docker, I find it really useful once I am starting to move from the exploratory to the building phase, right? Much keeping in mind with that, like an empty Docker image is a brand new computer. It doesn't have all of your packages installed by default. It doesn't have a lot of useful things that you are going to need. So if you're just wanting to like run around quickly, try a whole bunch of different things in rapid succession and see what works, what doesn't, doing that in a Docker container probably going to be, you're going to run into a lot of walls there. But once you start to get into that next phase of, okay, I think I've got an idea of how this is supposed to work, I've got things sketched out, I have a rough idea of like where I want to go with this, that is when my next step is always, okay, I'm going to put this into a Docker container and get it all set up in there, so that as I move forward, I keep the record of what is actually necessary to run this analysis. And so that I can start sharing it with collaborators and know that like they don't have to worry about installing all of the packages. They just pull down the Docker image and it works for them. Or they at least get the consistent same not working that I do, so they can help me debug it. Again, it's once you have an idea of where you need to go, what the analysis should look like, you've got all of the steps in place and can start running it as a script rather than poking individual commands on the command line. That's where Docker really starts to shine.
Thanks a lot. Antoine, I see you, I'm not sure if you were raising your hand. It is a good time to ask questions and make comments right now. The only thing I would like to cover for the rest of the meetup that is more like lecture type is breaking down from the two commands that I showed today, breaking down the first one and giving you pointers about, okay, so if you have something like that, if you have an example that you find in the wild, where do you go to learn what those commands mean, so that you can teach yourself at the pace at which you need it. So based on real life examples. Okay, I have this thing, I can run it, but I don't even know what it is, where I learn what it is. So I'm going to show that. But before I jump to that, I think Alex said really nicely the context, the why. You might want to use Docker. So this is a good opportunity to clarify or to ask questions. So please go ahead if you have them. Daisy, please go ahead.
Yes, just one quick question. So I'm guessing that if I'm sharing a Docker image with someone to try to reproduce an error, for example, that I'm getting, the other person also needs to have Docker or not? It should. All right. And the other person will need to use it as like just in the same way that I'm doing it. So not in his or her R computer installed in their computer, but in the website as we did, exactly as we did.
Right. So extending that whole like FedExing a laptop to someone, it's the analog is like you and that other person sit down at the same computer, right? And you're both looking at the same screen, almost. Okay. Or more accurately, it would be like you sit down at the computer, type in your commands, find some weird behavior, and then you like scribble some notes on a Post-it and stick it to the screen and wait for that other person to use it, right? they're going to get the same behavior, but it doesn't necessarily have to be at the same time. But you know that the same computer is going to give you the same behavior both times.
Okay. But anyway, this is strictly necessary that the other person has Docker installed also.
Yeah, so installing Docker is a one-time thing. Once it's installed, you're good to go. There's occasional updates that mostly you don't need to worry about. Do they work? Do they not? It's a very stable product.
Okay.
The only real issue I run into with having Docker installed versus not installed is it really likes to take up a lot of space on my hard drive. So for me, my computer here has 128 gig hard drive, and Docker takes up half of that.
Okay.
But if you have a computer where you've got 60 or 70 gigs available on the hard drive, you probably won't even notice it.
All right. Good. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. Any other question or comment right now? I'm gonna start sharing my screen again. What I wanted to share now is a little page to break down the first command that I showed, and hopefully give you an heuristic about how you can go about teaching yourself Docker when you see a command. So the command I ran first is this one here. I'm gonna run it in a new terminal to show you what it was. So this command here is the one that came from the Docker project. So all I did is I just opened a terminal and pasted it, and that started another session. So what does that do, and what it all means? So first, let me clean this console with Control L. I'm gonna put my console here on the right and this other page here on the left. So everything that we do with Docker will start with Docker. Later, Alex is going to be covering another tool that is a cousin of Docker. It's called Docker Compose, but still starts with Docker. So the word Docker is going to be in the beginning of all these commands. And the one thing that you do generally when you want to learn about a specific tool, in this case Docker, is to ask for help. So one way you can help yourself is just type docker -- help. Can you see my terminal here on your screens?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So here is a bunch of things that you can do with Docker, including, for example, run. So what does the command run do? It runs a command in a new container. So that is the first line of help that you can use. Go to your terminal, type Docker, and then -- help. Or you can focus on a specific subcommand, in this case run. So if I want to help run, I can do something like this, Docker run help, and then it should be giving me a filtered manual specifically for Docker run. So here is the usage, and we are going to be trying to understand what that means. But the very best place I suggest to learn is what's called a reference. So for every command in Docker, there is a reference page that explains in a way that is a bit nicer than your terminal what that command is, with examples and with pros. It's not very easy to digest the first time you read it, so it may take some time to understand. So that's why I wanted to kind of break it all down. So for example, if I see the command docker run and I want to learn about it, I can go, as I showed you before, to the terminal, but better I could go to the page of Docker run. So as you can see, there is a page for Docker run reference, right? So for every command, there is a reference page. If you Google it, you will eventually land there. And it has this general form that I show you on the page. Let's see what that means. So as you can see here, there are some words here in the general form that are not embraced by brackets, and others that are. The ones that are embraced by brackets are optional, and the ones that are not are obligatory. So that if I want to do anything with Docker run, it is obligatory to use the words Docker and run, right? And also the word image is outside brackets. So it's also something that I have to put there. But that image is not gonna be typed directly, it's gonna be typed, so you're gonna replace that by the image that you want to use. So we're gonna be talking about what an image is in a moment. So Docker run, that's what maps to here in the general form, and the image part of it is this one here, right? So we are using an image, a mini computer that was built by these people that developed the Rocker project. That's why it started with Rocker /. And they didn't build just one image, they built a bunch of images. So specifically, we are using an image that just creates, this, starts R for me. It does, it could do a few other things, but by default, that image will do what I just showed you, which is start an R session. So far we understand these three commands: Docker, run, and this kind of placeholder for image, which in this case is Rocker /rbase. And then the --, remove, and -ti, those are commands that, again, you can find in the documentation. So again, you go to the documentation of run, so Docker run, the reference page, and you can see, for example, that the --, remove, so it's something that you can even filter for. You can do Control F and do --, rm and see where that shows up. So it shows up here in the cleaning up section. And for example, what it does is it creates this mini computer, and when you're done, it will delete that computer. So you are creating ephemeral computers. Of course, you wouldn't do that with your laptop. It's not that you run R one time and then you throw it away. That could be very expensive, but with Docker, it's not. It's free. So you create these computers and you destroy them afterwards, if you want. So how you tell Docker, I want to get rid of that computer. Thank you. It's wrapping up very soon. How you tell Docker to throw away that computer when you're done so that it doesn't take up space, as Alex suggested? Well, with the --, rm flag. And finally, the other command that I wanted to mention is this ti, but only for just another example of how you can look things up in the documentation. So in short, that command, what it does is gives you a terminal that is interactive, so I can interact with R from the console. You might wonder, well, what's the other option? Well, the other option is non-interactive, because there are some commands that run on a background and they don't give the user the ability to do something from the terminal. For example, the image that I showed you that was running RStudio, in the terminal, that terminal was kind of useless. It was just showing logs, but as a user, I didn't interact with that terminal. I was interacting with the web browser. Okay, so that is all I wanted to cover today and all that we have time for. So I will go back to your pretty faces over here, see if there is any burning question or comment before I say goodbye. Okay, this might have been a lot for a first day. Again, I invite you to the help desks if you need to install Docker or if you want just to play with Docker a little bit more. And otherwise, I say thank you, and I see you next week with more content about Docker.
Thanks, Mauro.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.